so nice to see you all this afternoon. I'm Margot Valenti. I'm a JD class of 13, and I am the chair of the Alumni Engagement Committee for the Vermont Law School Alumni Association. Do you know how hard it was to just say VLSAA out loud? That hurt. So we're so excited that you have joined us today. This is an event that is a collaboration as part of the Alumni Association's webinar series, in which we focus alumni and all of the interesting and rad things that they are doing in partnership, this one specifically, with the Career Services Office. So I am going to go through some housekeeping, introduce our lovely moderator, and then we will get on with the show, and I will turn it over to them. So a couple of housekeeping items. You can see that I've renamed myself to my name, my degree, and the year. If you want to click the little 3 dots in the upper right corner and just kind of identify your degree and your year, you're welcome to do that. It's nice to get a feel for who's on. Let's see what else. If you can please stay muted throughout the presentation so that we don't get any background noise. If you unmute yourself, we will remute you, in which case you will probably have to ask us to unmute, which will probably be problematic later, because at the end of this, we're going to have a question and answer session. So you are welcome at the end of this to unmute. We can have an open, fun conversation with Brian. You are also welcome to put your questions throughout the presentation in the chat, or you can just send them directly to me. I will compile them and I will get them all settled for the end session. This is an open, fun presentation, so please feel free during the Q&A to just unmute yourself. And cameras are optional. If you want to have your camera on, great. If you want to sit in the background while Brian is speaking to us, totally fine. So with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator, who's then going to introduce our speakers. So from our lovely Career Services, we have Abby Armstrong, who is the Director of Career Services, but is particularly focused on JD, joint and dual degree, and LLM students. She serves on the Judicial Clerkship Committee, and she works with students who are pursuing judicial clerkships. Abby has worked in legal education for nearly 30 years, including the Director of Legal Writing, teaching torts, appellate advocacy, and legal research. She joined the VLS Office of Career Services in 1990, which I was just making the joke to her, which, if like me and my 97 roommates, you have probably cried in Abby's office during your tenure at VLS. It is just... Sorry, Abby, it's who we are. Before her time at VLS, she went to Skidmore, and she does have her JD as well from Vermont Law. So Abby is an alum as well. So with that, Abby, I will turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Margot. It's nice to be back in your orbit. I hear about you through various emails, but it's nice to see you, at least virtually. And thank you to the VLSAA and the Alumni Office for setting this event up. I think it's a really nice idea to feature Brian. It's not often that we have an alum who has written a book about job searching, and it's a great book. I will just tell you, if you haven't read it yet, it's a great book. I'm really impressed with the advice that he provides, and I'm looking forward to talking with him in a couple of minutes about the different ways one can look for a job. First, I want to introduce you to him. Brian is a business attorney, litigator, entrepreneur, teacher, including here at Vermont Law School, where he has had a profound effect on the students who are in his class, because I hear about it when they come into my office. And he's also a writer. He has advised a range of Fortune 100, 500, and smaller clients. He and his team have appeared in more than 50 administrative proceedings and dozens of federal and state court cases. He is also the founder of the Nationwide Legal Mentor Network and the author of the Jobless Lawyer's Handbook. For the next 30 minutes or so, he and I are going to talk about his path, what prompted him to start the network and to write the book, and then explore some of the thornier aspects of getting the legal job, which presumably is what's brought some of all of you together with us today. We'll then open the floor, as Margot said, to questions. First, and my introduction of Brian was brief, because I think as part of his introductory remarks, he's going to tell you a little bit more about his path. So Brian, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Abby, and it's great. I've since this whole thing happened to me, and it really did happen to me, I will explain how and why in a second. I've had to do this a lot, and I really, there's obviously a very fond place in my heart, if that's the right saying, for VLS. I'm a huge VLS fan. I loved VLS when I was there. I love Vermont. So super stoked to be able to, talk to everybody today and be back in this form. So when I said this happened to me, I'm not joking. For those of you who don't know, just as background, the beginning of COVID, I'm digging around in my garage and I found a pile of all of my rejection letters from the AmLaw firms that I had applied to. So when I was definitely a 2L, but also maybe a 1L, I thought it was a good idea to just apply to every one of the 100 top AmLaw 100 firms. And back then, you had to actually type out letters and resumes, blah, blah, blah. And then I sat there and watched all of my mailbox get filled up with rejection letters. So I kept them for some weird, sick reason. And then literally at the beginning of the pandemic, I found my one from Perkins Coie in the garage, and I thought it would be funny to frame it and put it in my office where I'm now a partner. And when I did that, I literally bought a frame and put it in a cheap frame and came to my office, and I was about to hang it up, and I said, it'd be a funny post on LinkedIn if I just posted a picture of my rejection letter on LinkedIn. And so I did, and this was literally maybe less than 5 LinkedIn posts in my whole life before this. LinkedIn wasn't really a thing to me before this. And I posted this post, law students, if at first you don't succeed, try again, with a picture of my rejection letter, which hopefully everyone can see, from 2002. And 4 million people saw it. It blew up on LinkedIn, and somehow my wife, who's over here in the refrigerator, likes to joke that I'm famous for getting rejected. But I just struck a chord, and over the next 3 months, and really it was weeks, I got inundated with requests from people wanting to hear my story, ask me how I did it. Obviously, COVID had, tanked the job market, and so people were in a really bad place. And so I just started talking to people, because I've sort of always had a policy that if anyone emails me, I'll talk to them. And so I started talking one-on-one with all of these law students and recent grads who are having a terrible time finding jobs in COVID. And I started posting some of their stories on LinkedIn to try to help them find jobs. And it just sort of grew into this thing. And pretty quickly, people on LinkedIn reached out and said they wanted to help mentor, because I said, I think I had 2 or 3 a day, half-hour meetings a day for months lined up. And so, there's obviously only one of me, and I was trying to help as many people as I can, but I did have a day job. So all these lawyers came out of the woodwork from LinkedIn from all over the country, almost none of whom I knew, and agreed to mentor law students who were contacting me. And so, again, I just sort of kept doing it and leaning in, because it was the right thing to do during COVID. We're lawyers, we're not doctors. What else are we going to do to help? And this just seemed like a natural thing to do. And so I started just, again, continuing to meet with people. I've since met with, at this point, close to 400 different people one-on-one, just half hour, how can I help you? What can I do for you? Kind of meetings. And this turned into a informal legal mentor network on LinkedIn. And it turned out I ended up with 350 lawyers from around the country in an Excel spreadsheet on my computer. And I literally did 2 posts on LinkedIn looking for mentees, and I got over 1,000 emails. So I had to, by hand, link up the 1,000 people looking for mentors with the spreadsheet, because you really do need a lawyer to look at the matching to really make sure that, the practice area is the same, it makes some sense. And in that process, and by the way, this took months, like I did it when I could. But in that process, I very quickly realized I can't keep doing this. And so a few people who were mentors in the network were just loving it. And we got together and started a nationwide legal mentor network, which I'll show you the website, which launched in December of this year. I can show it here. And so one thing I'd like everybody to take away from this is if you're a law student or a recent grad, you can go to this website now, legalmentornetwork.org. You go to the Get Involved page, you fill out a form down here, and you can either become a mentor or get mentees, or if you're a mentee, you can get mentors. It's all free. It's just facilitating introductions between lawyers who have agreed to mentor from all over the country. We're up to almost 500 now, and law students. All the law students have to do, and young lawyers, really anyone, we don't turn anyone away. If you want mentorship or you want to mentor young lawyers, you just fill out this form and hit submit, and you will receive either mentees or mentors via email. So that's been really cool. And in this whole process of me doing these half-hour meetings, my wife, again, said, you say the same thing a lot over and over and over, you should just write that down. And so, of course, with the LinkedIn network and everything, I was like, well, you're right. I should write that down, but what I don't need is another project. So after, fretting over it for a little while, I dove in and that's where the book came from. So basically the book is, after talking to, at the time, 250 to 300 different people looking for jobs one-on-one, to putting this mentorship program together and using my own personal experiences of how did I get to where I am, and doing a lot of research, I put this book together. Again, not really for any reason other than to help people, because I really think there's a lot of information. Just talking to young lawyers and law students, there's just a ton of information that they don't know and don't know how to access. And so a couple cool things from the network, and then I'll jump into just, very, very high level highlights of some of the points I make. But the network, interestingly, we've gotten, since we started tracking data, we've something like 600 or 700 mentees just since November. And that has, we have about 60% of them that are diverse and 80% of them that are first-time lawyers. So we're finding, and they're all over the country. So, if somebody at VLS wants to go work in Tucson, Arizona, they can go sign up for the Legal Mentor Network, and we're going to give them lawyers that are hopefully in Tucson, Arizona. So it's been really interesting to see. And we just hosted our first ever Legal Mentor Network happy hour in New York. And it was really cool to see mentors meeting their mentees for the first time in person. It was just like definitely the happiest lawyer event I've ever been to. Everyone seemed really seriously happy to be there and helping each other. So that was nice. I do want to I know there's probably some law students on, so I do want to impart a little bit of my wisdom, if you want to call it that. So, I think the two fundamental pieces of information that I really wish I had known, and this isn't Abby's fault, by the way, she may have told me and I didn't take it in. That's very plausible. But the two things that I have found just through my own journey and talking to a lot of folks that a lot of law students and young lawyers don't know is, number one, you're going to be most marketable, and I'll come back to what I mean by that, when you are 3 to 5 years out. So after you graduate, after you pass the bar, then 3 to 5 years after that, that is the window at which, you will have the most different job opportunities available to you. The hardest time to get a job is right when you graduate from law school, because 35,000 law students graduate across the country every year at the same time, and they're all hitting the job market at the same time. And the only distinguishing factors are really where they went to law school and what their grades were. Obviously, you can do as much as you can in law school to, distinguish yourself. But the bottom line is, after that first job, that same group of 35,000 people is basically your seniority level of lawyers as you go throughout your career, and they're never all looking for jobs at the same time again. So it not only is it logical that it would be the hardest time to get a job, it's also, at least from what I've seen and from everyone I've talked to, true. I don't know why it's the 3 to 5 year window, but I can tell you from being in firms and just knowing a lot of people and my own experience, I went from begging for a job. I could only get one job coming out of law school, notwithstanding Abby trying her best. And then 2 years later, 3 years later, I'm getting inundated with recruiting emails from recruiters for lateral positions. And I've seen this over and over and over and over. So this point is really important. You might be like, okay, I'm in law school. Why do I care? I need a job now. Well, it's important because if you want to be a privacy lawyer in New York City, you don't need to be a privacy lawyer in New York City right when you graduate. Or if you want to do environmental litigation in California, you don't have to get that job right out of law school. You need to think about, how do I get my resume and my career experience to look the best in that window of time. So that changes your options and things you might or might not consider when you're a young lawyer, because, for example, geography matters a lot. What law schools are around there? If you're applying to law schools in Florida, where there's 12 law schools and the highest ranked is University of Florida, you're going to be way more likely to be in the top of the pile and get an interview than you are if you apply in New York, DC, LA, or Chicago, which are the 4 areas where 70% of the mentees who emailed me wanted to go. So the point is, would you live in Miami for 2 years doing environmental litigation if you could end up in California in your dream city doing that? I mean, maybe, but you should at least be considering that. And so these are the kinds of things that I think a lot of law students are just like, I want to do this, therefore that's what I'm going to try to do immediately. And of course you should apply to your dream jobs. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you need to be a little bit more strategic about it. The other, number 2, and then I'll get into, I promise there will be dialogue. Number 2 is 70 to 85% of the jobs that people get in their lives come from people you know or have met. If you're in law school, you probably don't know that many lawyers, or even a young lawyer, you probably don't know that many lawyers. So if you want to increase your opportunities, increase the chances of getting a job or your dream job, you need to meet more lawyers. You need to and whether you call it networking, whether you call it spamming people and Zooming, it doesn't really matter. The name of the game is to create more opportunities for yourself. And if you're not meeting actual practicing lawyers, they don't have to be people that can hire you, then you are hugely limiting the opportunities. Just searching online, finding jobs and applying for them. Of course you should do that. Everyone should do that. That's great. But I have told some, pretty significant, I have a whole set of ways you can get people to meet with you that are in the book, and I'd be happy to go over with in a minute. But the point is, if you're not meeting with people, new lawyers, making relationships with lawyers, you are hugely limiting. 70 to 85% of the jobs are going to come from people you know or have met. So again, if you're a 5th year associate at a law firm and you never leave your office and build 3,000 hours a year, you're really not doing your career any service. So those are the 2, main things that a lot of my recommendations come from. But the bottom line is, there's no silver bullet with job hunting. It really is about creating as many opportunities for yourself. And the last thing I'll say is, and it's an anecdote I provide pretty often, if a young lawyer, let's say a 3L or a new grad, meets with and networks with 100 different practicing lawyers and applies to 50 jobs online, and another, lawyer B doesn't, and just networks with 5 or 10 and applies to 5 or 10 jobs online. If the first lawyer gets a job and the second one doesn't, is the first lawyer lucky? Sure, of course. But they had a lot more chances to get the job. And so it really is, I mean, I talked to so many students who were like, yeah, I tried to network. I emailed 20 people and no one responded. And so I stopped. Or I met with 3 people and it didn't get me a job. So now I'm doing something else. And like, that's the wrong mindset.
Yeah. So I think this is where I'm supposed to jump in and
I just abruptly stopped. So
smoothly transition from all of that to something. So I want to ask you a question that actually tries to bring together that we have law students and people who have been out of school for quite some time, and also incorporate that I have been watching law school career services for 30 years and the changes that have occurred in the legal employment world in that time. So I'm trying to figure out, and I'm not sure what the question is that's going to come out of this, but I'm trying to figure out, how do you say to a law student, to a recent grad, and to someone who's been out maybe 15 or 20 years that may not be satisfied with their legal career at this moment? They may have reached a point where they have a career, they're making some money, but it's not what they want it to be. How do you apply the concepts that you were just talking about? And I'll give you a quick, for instance. In law school now, we try to facilitate those introductions. This is what law schools do, right? The externship programs, the clinics, you're trying to help people who are, sometimes terrified of having to be introduced to a real lawyer because they don't feel like they have anything to offer. So we're trying to facilitate those initial relationships just to get the ball rolling. Same with the recent grads. How can we help get people in front of through the Alumni Association, through however we can think of it? But what do you do how do you help people do that themselves? And then also, how do you do that for the person who's been out 10 or 15 or 20 years?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I see it a lot. Law students and young lawyers are really just nervous, and that's totally normal. Everybody's nervous. Frankly, you fake it until you make it. And most people, even when they make it, still think they're faking it. So, the truth of the matter is practice and just putting yourself out there one-on-one. Even if you're introverted, Zoom has made it so much easier to do. And by Zoom, I mean any video conferencing platform. It's made it so much easier to meet new people with very little time commitment on either person's side. So, for example, if you're 10 years out, 5 years out, 2 years out, or in law school, I don't really care. You are better off the more people you know that know who you are and like you. Full stop. You're always going to have better success in your career. And the reason is because lawyers are consultants, and consultants only get hired if people know they exist. So the more people know you exist, think of you fondly, recommend you, talk about you, or the better your whole career is going to be. And the same is true in the job realm. So what I often recommend is pick 5 cities. And again, I'm assuming you're changing jobs, but regardless, pick a couple places locations where you're willing to live. And I say willing, not want to live. And then literally Google search for lawyers that do what you want to do and email them cold. And you'll have to do it a lot, and you'll get, a lot of them won't respond, and that's fine, because no one is ever going to be mad at you because you're only going to ask for advice. You never use the word job. Don't use the word job in any correspondence with anyone unless you are specifically applying for a job that's posted. The reason is because if you email me cold and say, hey, I'm looking for a job in Madison, would you talk to me? I'm a weird one, and I would actually respond and do it. However, a lot of people are going to be like, well, I don't have a job opening. I don't want to talk to this person because then I'm just going to feel guilty about not being able to give them a job. but that means the person emailing didn't get to talk to me. And so if you ask for advice, no one ever gets mad at you for asking for advice, and you get to actually get advice. So, you know, again, let's pick Burlington. Let's say you want to live in Burlington after law school. Or as a young lawyer, you email lawyers you don't know. It doesn't have to be people that can hire you. In fact, I've often found that the mid-level associates or the people who are 5 to 10 years out are often the most helpful. But you cold email them and you say, I'm really interested in practicing business law in Burlington. You know, maybe give them a sentence or two about yourself. Would you give me some advice about which firms in Burlington have the best business law departments? So again, a lot of people are just going to not respond because lawyers are busy or assholes, which is fine. But you will get people responding. And then what happens is you get on the phone with them or you get on a Zoom with them. It's 30 minutes, limited 30 minutes. You just ask for advice again. And what you're doing is showing them, A, that you're a real person. Now they know you. You're showing them your social skills, but you're also going to learn out a lot of information. You wouldn't believe one-on-one how many people will tell you, like, this place is terrible, you don't want to work here. Or I know so-and-so, they're leaving their firm, you should apply there. Or, and this has happened to me, someone emails me and I meet with them. 3 weeks later, a month later, my associate quits. Well, I remember that person because I just met with them, and I email them and I say, hey, are you interested in a job? Now I have an opening. So those are all things that wouldn't have happened if the person didn't email me and ask me for advice. Did they get a job from me? Not necessarily. But then the other key factor is once you get somebody on the, I call it on the hook, you get somebody to respond, they agree to do a Zoom with you, you do the Zoom, you don't know this person at all, it's fine, you're just asking for advice. At the end of the Zoom meeting, even if you hate them, you say, this has been amazing, thank you so much. Can you give me 1 or 2 other people in your network that you know that I could talk to about business law programs or business law departments in Burlington? Almost everyone who you're on the phone with who is giving you advice is going to give you 1 or 2 contacts. And what does that do? You just created a warm lead for yourself out of thin air. You didn't know me, but I gave you 2 people. And now when you email those 2 people, you're going to say, I got your name from Brian Potts in the first sentence. I'd really love to pick your brain about this and this. Doesn't matter what you ask for advice about as long as it's reasonable. And then those people, assuming they like me, which is a big assumption, they're going to say, you know, oh, somebody that Brian referred me to wants to talk. And so now when you get on the phone with them, you have basically already have warm, happy feelings, and then the people can help you. And then you do it again. And pretty soon you don't have to spam hundreds of people. You're just networking through your own network in the cities you want to live in. And it's, again, it will feel like you're banging your head against the wall. You're going to say, Potts is an idiot, this doesn't work, until it does. You only need one job, and you only need to make one connection with one person. It can change your entire life. I mean, I learned this method mostly through doing startup fundraising. So if you start a company and you have to go, you know, basically ask people for money, you're asking for investment in your company. Well, when you go to investors, you don't sit down and say, can you give me some money? You sit down and you ask them for advice about the company you're doing. You pick their brain about what you might change or not change. Then you follow back up with them in a couple weeks or a month, and you follow their advice, assuming it's good advice. You change your pitch deck, you do whatever, then you follow up with them again, and a couple more, you know, weeks or months later, and pretty soon they're like, this person is, you know, really working hard doing this, and you build a relationship with them, and then eventually they'll invest. That is like the standard how you raise money as a startup, and it's the exact same for getting a job. You just ask for advice, ask for help, stay in touch with people. Ideally, you do nice things for the people that you have met who have given you advice. So if you get a job, you email them and thank them and give them credit for their advice and how that helped you get the job. And then you try to you don't have to stay in touch with all these people, but you just try to stay in touch with as many as you can. And over time, pretty soon you have a huge network of people who know you and think about you fondly, whether they've hired you or not. And as a consultant, as a lawyer, that's going to go a long way. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer, Abby.
When I was getting ready for this last night, I thought to myself, I'm pretty much just going to have to ask one question.
Yeah.
Because, and then I was going to be able to sit back and let you do your thing. And you're not disappointing, which is great. I mean, the information you're giving is great. But how do you get people to take the long view, right? I mean, we don't live in that world right now. Law students certainly don't live in that world. The pressure of debt, that whole notion of, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more about the 3 to 5 years. You know, we're obviously focused on that first job after school, and it's really hard to shift the mindset. So what do you say? What do you say about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, they'll learn the 3 to 5, you know, that it is a long game over time. I mean, it just is. But there are a lot of things you can do in the short term to make yourself feel better. For example, I mean, number one, wide generalization, but almost always true. People spend way too little time looking for a job and working on their job hunt. The average law student spends 20,000 hours in classes going from kindergarten through law school, and very few spend more than 100 actually looking for a job. So if those two things don't make any sense together. So, you know, one thing is like, be rigid, set a schedule, make sure you're working an hour or two a day on, you know, marketing yourself, whatever that means. It doesn't matter, just do stuff. So that's one thing. The other is the sort of funnel approach I like to recommend to people, which is, and I just recommended this yesterday to somebody. So basically you got to figure out, okay, when do I need the job so that I can pay my bills? Like, what is the date that I absolutely, in my mind at least, have to have a job? And then you back up from that date and you basically say, okay, I really want to be in San Francisco doing whatever it is, business law or startup law. And so that for the first, if you got 6 months until your drop dead date, for the first 2 months, you focus on San Francisco getting the job that I really want. If that doesn't work, then you open your funnel and you go to other cities, maybe that aren't your dream city, but where you're going to be more marketable because they don't have as good of law schools around there. You have some connection to there, whatever it is. So then you open your funnel a little bit more, and then you open your funnel a little bit more. And then as you get closer, you're basically obviously willing to take more jobs. This is a pretty logical pathway, but sometimes just telling people that, articulating that, and giving them a plan makes them feel a lot better about their job search, so that they sort of say, okay, I've mapped it out. Here's what I'm going to do in the next 2 months, the 2 months after that, and the 2 months after that. And then look, there's luck involved. There's no question. But if you have a plan and you follow the plan, you've done everything you can. And that's really what it's about, is making sure you're doing everything you can, especially early in your career, because where you start could have a huge impact on where you end up in 10 years. And so, and it's not everything. You could start here and end up way up, you know, wherever you want to be. But in general, the first 5 years, especially, how you can build your own brand and build your own resume to whatever the best level it is. That is really the time at which I think that your time is really well spent marketing yourself, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book there were two competing, what I interpreted to be competing ideas. One was this notion of, if you are offered a job, you don't have to take the first job offer. You don't have to take the first position that's offered to you. And then there was this other concept of you got to be open to new geographic areas. You got to be open to new opportunities. And we have a person in our office who's dedicated to working with our recent grads from sort of spring of the third year until they get their first job. And I think she runs into this frequently, that we have jobs. We have jobs that are good jobs They are career launching opportunities, and people are like, yeah, I don't want to live there, or I don't want to do that. And we're like, no, consider this, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't know how you reconcile that with the don't, you know, because they don't want to take that first job. They want to get the perfect job.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, everybody's different. Everybody prioritizes job versus, you know, free time and life and family differently. So, you know, there's not a one size fits all, but, you know, as I've said, your first job is almost definitely not going to be your last job. And it's almost definitely not going to be your dream job, because again, the hardest time for you to get a job will be right after law school. So even if you're first in the class, I still think it's to your benefit to look in geographies that aren't New York, DC, LA, and Chicago, because again, you might get a better job. You might get a job you like the people more, and or you might start out at a higher level at, you know, a higher ranked firm or a better clerkship or whatever it is. So, you know, I honestly believe that I would never be in the position I'm in now had I tried to go to New York, DC, LA, or Chicago right after law school. I'm certain of it, because what happened is I went to Kentucky. I got a good name firm, which was a mid-sized regional firm, but you know, it was a firm with 150 lawyers, and I practiced for a year and sort of billed my hours, blah blah blah, did all the things I'm supposed to do, got excellent reviews. And then, you know, that was my stepping stone to then go get an LLM, go to a little bit bigger mid-sized firm, again, get good reviews and do the stuff I'm supposed to do. And then in that 3 to 5 year window, an AmLaw 100 firm called me, and I wasn't even looking, and said, hey, are you interested in interviewing? And it was literally the only AmLaw 100 firm in the city I was living in, Madison. So I kind of couldn't say no. It was more money. It was so much. It was dramatically more money, basically the same job. And then I met with the two people there and ended up hitting it off really well with the two partners, got hired as a third-year associate, and the rest is history. That would not have happened to me had I just been like, you know, for lack of a better word, pig-headed, and been like, I have to live in San Francisco, so I'm going to only look in jobs in San Francisco. Like, there's no way I would be where I am now. However, I had to sacrifice by living somewhere. I mean, I am from Kentucky, but I absolutely did not want to live in Lexington, Kentucky when I graduated. I'm from Louisville. But I was like, well, I got to take a job, and this is a good job. And so I'm going to go there for a year or two and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think the one size does not fit all adage is so true, and we say it all the time. But it's how do you incorporate all of the little, you know, pithy bits of wisdom that you're imparting into your own framework, and have confidence that you're doing it in a way, you know, because the doubt, when you're looking for a job, there's so much doubt. It brings up so many different issues. So how do you do all of that and have faith that this is the right thing to do at this time when you're 20 years out of school, when you're 5 years out of school? I mean, again, I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that we have a wide range of people in the audience today. You know, how do you, it's an impossible question that you know, how do you put those pieces together?
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible, but the truth is, as a lawyer, the sooner you get used to rejection and criticism, the better, because it is built into our profession. I mean, I'm a partner at a firm. I'm in charge of some matters. It doesn't matter. I'll still write a brief, and I get back red lines, or from co-counsel, or from the client, or, you know, so you're constantly, as a lawyer, your written work especially, is going to be criticized, pushed back against, etc. So it's just part of the job. Now, that doesn't, you know, I don't think a lot of people like that, and that's fine, but it's the same way with applying to jobs. I mean, it's hard because it feels like a personal slight when you get rejected. but I have literally been rejected over 1,000 times. And at some point you become immune to it. I don't know when that was. Obviously it wasn't when I kept all my rejection letters. However, at some point you have to just realize, if I'm not getting rejected, I'm not trying hard enough. Because if you really want to get, the premier job, right, you're probably going to have to get, or whatever your premier job is, you're probably going to have to get rejected from all the stuff above it in order to get the one you want. So it's hard, it's unnatural, but it's just part of, the process. And the sooner you can sort of, thicken up your skin and be okay with it, the better.
Yeah, I think that whole paralysis that people have is really a central piece to, I mean, it's a central part of the process of looking for a job. But I want, Margot, do you want to have anybody jump in with other questions? I want to be sensitive to the time.
I think that is a great idea. Brock, do you want to take us back to the grid, and we'll open up the floor if people have some questions?
I can always ask Brian more things about.
Yeah, I have a couple over here too, but I want to give people the opportunity to speak.
Great.
There's 31 of you. Anyone?
Is it okay just to jump right in?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. That's what we want. Welcome, John.
Oh, hi. Yeah, my name is John. I'm a third-year law student here at VLS. I appreciate the comments about it's better to have a job than to not have any job, and it's important to find something maybe just as a placeholder. But I'm interested in some very sort of niche areas of the law: intellectual property, media, securities law. And I'm anxious to get back into the workforce, especially as an older student. But at some point, I think I do need to gain more valuable experience in these kind of specialized areas. Do you think it's important to just find something right out of the gate as best I can, and then look to target those certain areas, or is it kind of a fool's errand to try to specialize and go for these kind of smaller, almost micro segments of the law right out of the gate?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, I mean, what I would do if I were you are basically two things. One, and this is, people screw this up all the time. Let's say you want to do IP, right? But a firm has a job opening for something that you fit or your background fits. It's much harder to get hired than it is to change practice areas inside a firm. It is super easy to change practice areas inside a firm. I have seen, in fact, my associate right now just transferred from environmental to IP litigation because she liked federal litigation. So so think about that when you're applying to places, and that, you might be able to get your foot in the door in a firm that has a great entertainment department, but they won't hire you in the entertainment department, for example. We see that a lot at Perkins with the political law department. So that's one thing. The other is, what I would say is people want to know that you're interested in an area of law. So you should be applying to the areas that you're interested in. What I'm thinking is more like you might, be more open to, well, first of all, you should be networking with entertainment and IP lawyers, full stop. Like, you should just be spamming. And in fact, there's a bunch of entertainment lawyers in the Mentor Network. So you should definitely sign up for the Mentor Network, get 2 entertainment lawyers, talk to them, and they'll give you some ideas. But again, talking to people that are doing what you want to do will lead to that. You may not get the job right away, but those people will know who you are. And 2-3 years from now, you just stay in touch with them about your career trajectory, and that'll go a long way. The other thing with entertainment in particular, patent is less so, is there are a lot of very small firms that are very well respected in those, like that startup. I mean, there are firms, niche IP firms too, but those kinds of firms can also be great places to get in, where you're not big law, but you're doing the work you want to do for someone who, is respected, and you'll be able to lateral your way up later. I see Larry with his hand up.
Hey, Brian, thank you for taking the, let me ask a couple of questions. First, a personal one, if you don't mind, and then
Sure.
a business one. Are you the son of Brian Potts, who also went to Vermont Law School?
No.
Okay, well, I thought you may have been. There was a gentleman, I see Jacqueline Brilling. Jackie and I were in classes together back in '81. I know, well, I was
I
graduating.
didn't know there was another Brian Potts at Vermont Law School. I'm gonna have to hunt this Brian Potts down.
Yeah, he was. I thought that's one of the reasons I jumped on the call, because I thought you may have been the son. I mean, it's exactly the same spelling. And Brian was a great guy. I'd like to think he was a friend and smart guy. And everybody called him
Definitely
Mr.
not related to me then.
Well, everybody called him Mr. Potts. It was a lot of fun. He's a very, very insightful guy. Anyway, so that was the first question. Well, there's a personal connection there. I do have a business question too. I haven't read your book, but kudos to you for writing it. I think that's great. I think your comments so far, as I've been listening to your remarks, are spot on. Everything that you've said, I have seen in my 40 years since graduating. So kudos. And I think everybody who's listening here should take it in, because I think you've really nailed so many of the issues that I think we have seen as you go through life and go from one firm to the next or one job to the next. So good for you to summarize it like that.
Yeah.
The question I have is, one of the things that you haven't had a chance to address yet, at least I didn't hear it. If you did, I was driving for part of the time, was the whole concept of going in-house. After a number of years in practice, I went in-house and rose up to become general counsel for a world-leading manufacturing company. And I noticed that the practice inside was very different from outside. And I don't know if you commented on that, or that's part of your book, maybe it is, but I just want to explore that and also mention that to other students or recent grads, that is a lifestyle way to move your practice along, the practice of your professional career along in a way that I think meets with a lot better lifestyle choices than actually being in private practice, because I've had a chance to do both. So I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I do. So what I tell people, and I'd be curious of your thoughts, is, sort of similar to what Abby had told me back in, or someone at VLS in the Career Services Department told me, and I still think it's true, in that going to a firm right after law school gives you the most options. In other words, it's easier to go from a firm to in-house than it is from in-house to a firm. With that said, there's a partner in my office who was in-house, and now he's a partner at Perkins Coie. So it does happen. These are all just generalizations. The other thing that I have found with in-house counsel positions, and this is anecdotal, but I, at this point know at least 20 or 30 in-house counsel, that it's widely varying. The idea that in-house counsel's lifestyle is widely varying based on the company. I absolutely have friends who are in-house counsel that are working more than the associates at Perkins Coie, and not making more money. And so it is, so you really have to find, it's all about the people and the department and what you're looking for when you go in-house. The other thing that's hard with in-house, especially as a young lawyer, is it's really hard to find those positions. You have to literally go to every company's website, or maybe Indeed sometimes has them. What I recommend, though, is just an easy way to do it. Is, it's a little creepy, but I'm past that point, is go to LinkedIn, search the word counsel and the name of the company, and then connect with a bunch of in-house counsel at the companies you're interested in working at. All it takes is one of them to accept your connection, and now you have their email. And you email them and say, hey, I'm really interested in going in-house. Can you give me some advice? Don't use the word job. I'm gonna keep repeating that. Don't say job. And then again, you start networking. But it's the truth of the matter, and again, this is cynical, but is, as an associate, all firms are very similar. It's pretty much about the specific humans you're working with and what kind of platform it will give you later in life. I mean, as a partner, they're much different, law firms. And so, I think the same is true for in-house. I know in-house counsel that love their jobs. They literally never work on the weekends. It's 9 to 5. They make great money. They have professional success. They like the intellectual stuff they're working on, and they have, it's amazing. But that is not always the case. And I thought when I came out that sort of in-house was like where you go if you don't want to work as much and get paid in the middle. And that's not the case.
Yeah, so true. I spent many nights, all night, working in the corporation as much as I did in my own law firm. So you're absolutely right. And you know, your point about who you know, and 75 to 80% of the jobs are secured by your own personal network is very true. So another comment, you know, sometimes now in my case, I actually had the privilege of starting the legal department. We'd actually had actually we turned it into a profitable department, which was pretty cool. Well, often the legal department is a cost center, not a profit center in most companies. Mm-hmm. But we had an assistant general counsel, 3 patent attorneys in succession. And one of the things I think that can also be a help if people do want to be inside a company is to look around in your general area, your regional area, and try to find a company that perhaps does not have any lawyers on staff. Mm-hmm. And you could talk to the COO, CFO if it's a smaller company. Maybe try to stay away from the HR department because they're only going to respond to what the principals are requesting. And if they're not requesting a legal team, then you're not going to get much headway there. But if you, as you say, connect with somebody who's in a more management capacity on LinkedIn, or perhaps you know someone, that's an entry. And if you go in more on the business side, in that case, I was also doing an MBA at night at the University of Connecticut. So I had the business side to speak to. And this particular CEO was looking for someone with more business. So I said, well, I could do either. And they said, sure. So that's what started that. So sometimes it's an unusual circumstance, and other times, the company may be right. They're spending a lot of money on outside counsel, and they need somebody in-house to manage the process, handle simple routine stuff like NDAs, and then also review legal bills to try to save the company money. So in many cases, a sharp lawyer on the inside can actually save the company money and provide a lot of routine stuff that you normally go outside for, and as a result, learn the business better than often outside counsel can. Notwithstanding the fact that a lot of people here are outside counsel.
Yeah, and a sneaky way to do that is just subscribe to PitchBook for a month, and PitchBook shows you which startups have just raised a bunch of money. Yep. And so a lot of these startups will just like close on 5, 10, 15, or $50 million and not have a lawyer. And almost always right after that, they're going to hire a lawyer. So it's great advice. I think, it's a great way to make a name for yourself and get into it, especially if you get into a young company and then it grows. That can be really a successful path.
Yeah, great. No, excellent. Good comment. So well done. Congratulations on your career.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
So I don't know, there's some stuff in the chat, it looks like, but one other thing, I don't know how much time we have, Abby, but one of my favorite comments that I haven't gotten to make yet, so I'm just going to make it. For anybody out there who has a resume, which is probably most of you, maybe not Larry, but the one thing that I see all the time that I think is a huge mistake on the resume is it says, here's the job, and then it lists 5 bullet points, and all 5 of those bullet points are research this, wrote a memo about that, argued this motion, whatever substantive things you did. From a practical perspective, though, the person reviewing that almost never cares substantively what you did at your job. What they want to know is, did they like you? Did you get good reviews? Did you meet your hours requirements? And why are you leaving or not there anymore? Those are the things that should be in bullets. And so like one of the examples, I mean, my basic strategy is the first bullet should say something good about the place you work, because that says something good about you also. So, work for Larry Walters, the best GC and on the planet, blah, 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 blah. And then bullet 2 is what you do at the job. Bullet 3 is received excellent reviews from everyone with whom I've worked, unless you didn't. And then bullet 4 is why, voluntarily left to pursue an LLM degree, or was recruited away to work at a different law firm, or whatever. But so that when I look at your resume, when I look at somebody's resume and they have a firm or any job, and then they went to another job and it doesn't tell me why they left, that's automatic going to be, oh, did they get fired? Were they asked to leave? What happened? And so you can absolutely fix those issues and just basically lead the reader through your career without leaving any potential negative worries on their part.
Yeah, can I just add quickly to that, that I think it's always about whether they like you, whether somebody can stand you. And I think as you professionally mature, what goes into your resume changes, right? So if you are, and I'm again trying to be cognizant of the different people on this call, that if you're a 2L, what you put is different than if you're 10 years out of school. You know, like when you're a 2L, we have to make sure you hit some of these points about having the competencies so that you can get hired to begin with by somebody. And then a year down the road, you say something different. A year down the road, say something different. And I want to make sure that this concept of it's not one size fits all. All of the advice that you're giving is so good. It just has to be looked at through the lens of the individual who's trying to pitch themselves.
Yeah, and that's why at the beginning of every one of my calls, the first thing I say is give me 5-minute background about yourself, what you want to do when you grow up, where you want to be, etc., so that you can try to tailor it. And I'm sure you do this, you do the same kind of thing, Abby. But there's not a right answer for everybody, but the wrong answer is to sit there and do nothing or worry about it or just apply online and then throw up your hands. That you've worked way too hard. Every single law student who graduates has worked way too hard to not put a lot of time in to try to get their job.
Margot, are you seeing I can't see if people have their hands up or whatnot. I don't have all of them.
No, I think all is quiet and we are at 4:30. So I will leave you both to make a couple of remarks, and then I have some closing bits of pieces for everybody. But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like, not being afraid to get into your preferred position in an adjacent manner is a good way to do this, whether that's a different location or like I'm a person who got my basically in-house counsel job in an adjacent way. And so it's very interesting to reflect back on that almost 10 years later, as opposed to when I was panicked in Abby's office being like, this isn't a legal job and I don't want to live in Michigan.
Yeah, right. But you did, right?
I did. I took a fellowship with a Great Lakes organization and a keeper called. And just like Larry said, we have too much work in-house and you're licensed in New York. Can you come here and be our lawyer?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. No, it is, and it happens time and time and time and time and time again. I mean, that is the story that we hear over and over again. And I think if you're a student, it's building your background as much as you can while you're in school, and it's diversifying that background, and it's continuing to move forward, doing things that are always going to make you put you in a good light when you present yourself to an employer. And that's what Brian's saying, and you do it when you're 1 year out, and you do it when you're 2 years out, and you do it when you're 5 years out. And if you keep moving forward, as Margot just said, somebody notices you.
Yeah.
And it's just hard to keep at it. It
is. You just got to keep doing it. And I say, on a positive note, though, I will say, I mean, I know, and I bet everybody else who's been out a while knows that, I know multiple people that I graduated with that didn't have jobs for 9 months, a year after they graduated. Or I know people who failed the bar many times, and now they're in amazing jobs that they love, and they're wildly successful by any objective means. So I think don't put too much stress on yourself, but put enough stress on yourself that you continually do stuff, because that's really the name of the game.
Well, and I will just add to that, and then I will stop. I think one of the things that's true about Vermont Law School students and graduates is when you come out of a school like this, that many people chose to come to. I mean, you choose to come to a school in the middle of a town of 2,000 people, right? I mean, there's some.
Is everybody else still there?
Oh, yes. I was going to say either everyone froze or Abby froze.
I think we lost Abby.
Abby is unfreezing. Brian, that's a great question for you, and then I'll wrap it up with some notes. Do you think that there were some particular strengths or like differences that you had coming out of VLS as opposed to a different school?
Yeah, I mean, I love VLS. I'm a huge VLS fan. I definitely got hired because I had environmental law experience from VLS, and that's what got me my first job. But it got me a job in Lexington, Kentucky, where that's uncommon, right? If you're applying to Burlington or DC, that's way less, way less likely to happen. So, and the same idea, my wife Abigail got a Supreme Court clerkship in Kentucky that she wouldn't have gotten in Vermont or anywhere else. Because she had a different resume, an interesting resume. The judge was like, I'm really tired of getting the same law students from UK and University of Louisville. And so, it's ready, fire, aim, but do it in a lot of places.
I don't know what happened.
You're back.
I won't get on the soapbox, but I'll just tell you that people get judged on their merits way more than I ever thought they would. And all of us should have faith that that's going to happen. And if you put yourself out there, I know people come to VLS and they think, well, I'm not at a top 100 law school, blah, 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 blah. You can be equally as successful from Vermont Law School as anywhere in the country. It may take a little longer in some cases. It may be more circuitous than, hard word to say, than for the person who goes to the big school and they put their resume in a slot and they go to a big firm. But it is clear, and I think Brian's book makes this very clear, and I think your comments make this clear. If you put yourself out there, you have things to offer and you're going to be successful. And it's wonderful to see all the people on this call. I hope you have all been happy with your careers. I know it can be hard to get started that first year, but we are going to buy more copies of this book and we are going to drop them around school because I think it will inspire people to just have that faith to keep trying. And if they do, we know they'll be successful. So yeah, it's great.
Well,
I agree with everything.
Thanks, Abby. When I'm going to give them out to all my students in my class too. So anybody that wants a free one, sign up for my summer class, Renewable Energy. There you go.
Which is actually the perfect segue into my wrap-up remarks, because I also want to tout a summer something coming up. So take Brian's summer renewable energy class. If you are a student, you should absolutely do it. He's hilarious and fantastic. And this was like a very abridged version. So I can imagine when you're in a looser circumstance, he will be even more entertaining and brilliant. So I'm so excited that you all joined us today. This little webinar series was a COVID creation to let us connect with each other in just different ways to check in, to see how people are doing. I mean, we are a family and swans fly together, love us or hate us. Families fight, that's what happens. And so we just wanted to have these points of connection. And I'm so thankful for you all being here. Following this program, you will be getting a survey. And so please fill out the survey on if you loved this or hated it. You can say something that one of the older gentlemen at that first job I had said to me, which was, you're actually kind of smart. You were so bubbly. I just thought I wouldn't like you very much. And I almost didn't get the job because of it. That is not a joke. So you can put that in your survey. If you don't like my demeanor, it is fine. But really, we want to hear if you have ideas for panels, things you want to talk about. These panels are here for you. There's also a link to make a gift, because we do not have an endowment. We survive on the backs of each other. So if you're willing to make a donation to the school, it is greatly appreciated. This is taking the blunt ask, not the soft ask. And then finally, our next panel is going to be a 3-part weed series. That is correct. We're taking on cannabis law. So we're going to have a cannabis panel in May, June, and those are going to be leading up to a cannabis CLE course that will be taught, that will be led at the in-person reunion. Reunion is on campus June 25th, and then there is all leading up to another summer course, which is a cannabis law course this summer. So we hope that you will join us for reunion. If you want to be on a panel, you want to lead a panel, by all means, let me or Andy, Lauren Brock know, and we're happy to have you. So that's all I have this afternoon. Anyone else have anything? Otherwise, we're free to go.
Jackie asked the question, but I can't
Yes.
see what it says.
Yeah, sorry. I'm one of those ancient ones, and I spent a career at the same agency. I'm a utility regulator. So, and it's what you said about renewable energy that got me thinking about it. And I'm just wondering what does it look like now when you're reviewing a resume and you see like 5 jobs in 10 years?
So
because I was 35 years at the New York State Public Service Commission in various positions, staff counsel, deputy counsel, ALJ, then secretary to the agency, but progressive positions, but nevertheless the same place.
Yeah, so I actually get that question quite a bit, and I think it's getting much better than when I graduated from law school. There was sort of a negative connotation with switching jobs a lot. I've seen that a lot less. What I would recommend is definitely explaining to the extent you can on your resume why you went from one job to the next, so that between, job 2 and job 3, you say, got, reached out to by a better opportunity or whatever it was whatever it was, I would just try to make it look as natural and give your explanations for why you switched on your actual resume under the jobs, because otherwise then you're basically answering the question immediately and making it a non-issue.
Okay.
And I honestly don't think it's that big an issue nowadays. We just hired a lateral partner at Perkins who had been at like 7 different AM law firms. So as long as you have a reasonable explanation for why you've been one to the other. I mean, if you've been fired 5 times in a row, I wouldn't say that, but which I highly doubt. But
well, that's
otherwise,
what my kids say. That's what my kids say. And my own son was at Dewey LaBeouf, and when it imploded. So
I mean,
found himself on the street for 10 months rather. So yeah.
I just literally, like, the last bullet point of each job would say, left to go pursue blah 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 or whatever happened. I also try to recommend, even if you hated a place, try to not say anything bad about your previous employer, just because some people view it as a red flag. Not everybody, and there are absolutely terrible employers, but it's just a risk that I don't think is worth taking.
Mm-hmm.
We had a student, an interviewer told me this. We had a student who was asked, what do you like the least about law school? And the student replied, legal writing. And the interviewer told us, just don't have them say that. So anyway, hi Deb.
Hi, actually, hi Abby. Actually, I came on because your name was on the email, and I wanted to come on and say hi. And if I could only say this, my internships, both during the summer and during the semester, were instrumental for me in getting and progressing throughout my career. And I ended up in the federal government, but it also provided me opportunity during an interview to talk about some of my internships. Department of Justice, what did I do there? For a while, I worked on Capitol Hill. So, and people were really interested. So that gave me that platform to kind of, perk up my skills. And also once I did get positions, I did, as I wanted to segue, I did volunteer work. I did a lot of pro bono work. I had the time. I moved to DC and that's how I occupied my time and developed friendships with other attorneys and firms that were doing pro bono work. So these are just little tidbits that at least it worked for me. And it's the networking, Brian, like you said, networking. And I am so glad I graduated from VLS, because when at Department of Justice, just for that internship, I was competing with so many people. and with people from top law schools. I'm like, why did you pick me? But it was the interview, and then the gal I ended up working for, the deputy director for that summer, and she said, and you just came across just sort of like the bubbly, just so open, not stuffy, but you had such an interesting background. And that's what did it. And she said, I felt like I would just enjoy working with you, which is just as what you said, Abby. All those type of things, your personality. And sometimes if you have a different backgrounds or different experiences, you can really make that work for you.
No one has worked harder. Sorry, no one has worked harder at getting a good job than you did when you were in law school. I can tell you that.
No, thank you, Abby. And Abby actually steered me away from some jobs that I was focusing on to say, it's not where you want to go. And you were right, Abby. It wasn't where I wanted to go in retrospect.
You know, if I could jump in with another comment, you know, Brian, to echo your comments earlier about person changing jobs, you know, every 2 years, there's another thing to consider. And I have a son who's in the tech industry in California, and the tech industry has made this famous. These guys are, they're changing jobs all the time. I mean, it's practically like a revolving door when you look at some of these tech firms. And if you take the adage, why do they do that? And the companies that hire them subsequently I think are experiencing that a person who does change jobs frequently actually has a lot more experience, because they're getting different slices of experience, even though they may be doing the same kind of coding work or whatever. It's in a different context. It has different challenges, different applications. And you end up, let's say, a person that's maybe spent 10 years in one place versus a person who spent, you know, in the same 10-year period, 5 jobs. I think you'll find that the person has had the 5 jobs, assuming that they all, you know, went well and they weren't fired, will be more experienced and have a broader understanding in their field than someone who's been there solely. So I don't think any recent graduate who has had many jobs in a short period of time should look at it as a deficit. I think they can spin it as a positive, and I think they should.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've been at 4 different law firms, and the other thing that happens is you get all the relationships. So you meet all the people you work with, you keep in touch with certain of them, but then, I mean, 2 or 3 of my clients, biggest clients now, are people I work with as an associate at prior law firms, right? And so I don't think it's an issue, again, as long as you paint it in the right picture.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Well, hey, Brian. Oh, sorry, Brock.
Oh, I was just going to say, well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time since we're about 15 minutes over already. But thank you all so much for coming. It has been great and clearly a great conversation as well. And I hope that you all will take the survey that Margot plugged, and that for those of you who are interested, we will see you on campus for reunion in June. We're really excited about it and hope to see you all there.